I'm Anastasios Panagiotopoulos. I'm co-PI of the project, and I'm a senior researcher at the Department of Social Anthropology at the University of Seville. Recently, because before I was a researcher at CRIA in Lisbon. So as part of the project, but also my general research interests, I will try to make a small summary of my transition to my previous research to the actual one. I have been studying since 2006 for my PhD at the University of Edinburgh, Afro-Cuban religiosity for almost a decade. Where I did fieldwork for 1 year in Cuba, Havana, and my research culminated into looking at various religious traditions in Cuba of African origin, with the then objective to kind of touch upon all of them rather than focusing on just one, which was and is still the tendency in anthropological studies of these religions, to mainly focus on one. So I ventured to kind of touch all of them. This was quite easy in the sense that the practitioners were also involved in more than one, so it was easy to follow them. And what I realized is how intense and important was the role of divination and the oracles. Each tradition, let's say, specializing in some special manifestations of the oracles and divination, but all of them as well sharing this need to reveal hidden aspects of life, so that then could possibly intervene in these aspects of life, manifested mainly as misfortunes and problems, personal problems in people's lives. Therefore, the difference between the traditions and the oracles also worked as a kind of glue, of complementary glue, exactly because each tradition and each oracle could reveal hidden aspects of the same person, of the same misfortune. So as I commented before, there was not an exclusivist attitude towards them, but an inclusivist one. But what I found interesting and what I found as uniting these different traditions was exactly this need and this intensity of the oracles, ranging from consecrated objects, rituals where the body was the main oracle, spiritist sessions, but also within the more Afro-Cuban traditions, spirit possession during rituals where music and dance were involved. In all these different manifestations, always messages would come out referring to particular individuals mainly, and not so much about broad collectivities. They were able to, let's say, reveal messages that had to do with the personal lives of the people. And then to quickly move on to, let's say, my transition in the research, I then started studying Afro-Cuban religiosity in Spain, in Europe, and particularly Spain, through the Cuban immigrants in Spain. And the clients or patients who were attending these Afro-Cuban religions in Spain were much more mixed in the sense that a big part of them were Spanish as well, who didn't have any previous contact with these religions. They were not part of, let's say, their traditional experience of religiosity. Again, what even Spanish people were emphasizing is this importance of divination that was able to reveal hidden aspects of life and then move on to the ritual remedies, let's say, to bypass these misfortunes. But there were also some changes in my research. Afro-Cuban religiosity was a much more marginal phenomenon in Spain. And also, what was more predominant were, let's say, less intense ritual manifestations of it. Even for practical reasons, animal sacrifice, which is very often in Cuba, loud music, percussions, spirit possessions, all these more intense and visceral manifestations of ritual would take a secondary role in Spain. And especially Spanish citizens were still attracted to, let's say, the oracular dimension of these rituals, but also they were less keen to participate, especially by way of initiation, to the more, as themselves call it, the more African aspects of these rituals. As I said before, spirit possession, animal sacrifice, or even get initiated. A big part of the people who attended Afro-Cuban religiosity in Spain were still interested in this revelation of hidden aspects of one's life, especially related to various kinds of misfortune. But other things very prominent in Cuba were taking a secondary role. And I also initially trying to find where Afro-Cuban religiosity, I could find Afro-Cuban religiosity. One part of it was through esoteric shops. So this kind of opened up my access to Afro-Cuban religiosity, but also the link that Afro-Cuban religiosity had to other religious and spiritual phenomena that were not so prominent in Cuba, but in Europe, yes. Like New Age, spirituality, a host of practices, astrology, the crystals and the healing power of Christian symbols like statues. So the research almost on its own kind of directed itself a bit outside Afro-Cuban religiosity, and I was beginning to turn my interest in all these more European, let's say, manifestation of alternative religiosities and spirituality. Now my research is in Spain and Greece, and I've been studying other kind of phenomena that also has this oracular dimension as part of them. One example is family constellations, which is a bit hard to identify with a kind of religiosity. And I think this is an important part of I think, all these manifestations of religiosity in a European context, where exactly the frontiers between religion and what is not religion is very hard to define. And I don't think it's only a problem, an analytical problem. I think it's a part of the context itself. in family constellations, as I said, it's hard to pin it down as a religious phenomenon. I will briefly describe them. It's gatherings of people in a private house. A group of people gets together and by turns, each one poses a very general problem. Sometimes it is important not to reveal many details so that a kind of flow is generated, spontaneous flow is generated within the session. And the rest of the participants take some roles according to the problem that has been posed by one of them. The roles are persons, family members from the social environment of the person, but they can also be objects or situations. So people can act as objects or situations that they have been revealed in the beginning by the person. One aspect is the beginning of these sessions are like a bit contemplative and a physical contact is being created. The person who is going to enact something or somebody will touch the person that is presenting the problem, and then as if it was a kind of light spirit possession, the person who takes a role starts enacting the role that has been assigned to him or her. And in this process, messages come out, messages that either only the person knew or not even that. In one session, for example, there was the one person was enacting a relative, and all of a sudden the relative said, you know, referring to the person who was, let's say, bringing the problem, when you were young, I have been sexually abusing you, which is a very strong, you know, kind of information. So let's say the religious or the metaphysic element of that is that, again, hidden aspects of life come out in the surface. I will not get into more details because of time, but I also want to bring to this discussion also some manifestations of transreligious manifestations in the European context, where there seems to be a very opposite direction referring to this oracular dimension of hidden messages coming out to the surface. I'm talking about practices like yoga and meditation and mindfulness, where it seems that the direction is the exact opposite. Instead of filling in gaps of biographical gaps or hidden aspects, there is this effort, let's say, to empty the self and erase, let's say, the specificities and contingencies of biographies. So what I want to bring here to the discussion is this kind of tendencies, which seem very opposite, but in this trans-religious context, they also seem to be in combination. From on the one hand, the need to enrich the self with hidden aspects, and on the other hand, the need to empty the self and not being so conscious of oneself and let's say touching upon the non-identity, where also discourses of universality, synchronicity, as many of you said take place. And I just want to finish with, just to link it with the autoethnographic and collaborative aspects and the senses. In Cuba, I had decided not to consult the oracles for a long time until I had some kind of confidence with the people. At the end of the research, I visited all the oracles for myself to consult them. The curious thing is that among all these different consultations, the main and common message was that I was okay. I didn't suffer from any misfortune, so there was no need to initiate myself. And I think this brings a questioning of what is autoethnography as well. Because I think there is a tendency to understand it as being part of these religious practices, when not being part may be a sign of the ideal state of these religious practices, which is not to be in need of these religions, paradoxically. And to link it to my present research, I think that there is a common context which goes beyond the practices we're dealing with. A very common element that comes out as a kind of misfortune to be healed from is a kind of internal distress, anxiety, which I think we could link it to the South European context of crisis. But here again, my point and my comment is that the transreligious ideal, it's not to be in need of the religious practices that are meant to bring this kind of healing from distress. And the need to attend these rituals is part of this holistic understanding of religion as not necessarily a benevolent aspect. Like, for example, spirits can be both harmful and benevolent, and not like Christianity that takes for granted your commitment to religion as the starting point. But being part of the religion could involve also the liberation from these practices.